Welcome, Chelsea. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
It's really such a joy. I've been using Looni for, over, I think probably 6 to 8 months now. And I'm really starting to see like the shift in my mental and physical and emotional well being. So it's really an honor to have you here. But before we dive into Looni and the brand you're building today, in Facing Forward, we talk about catalytic moments, catalytic stories that really inspire change and positive action. And as I mentioned, as I was diving deeper into your story, you have so many awe inspiring, catalytic moments. But first, I would love for you to start with your epilepsy diagnosis and how that has really shaped the work you put out into the world in holistic health and women's health.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It's a real pleasure. We have been trying to organize this for a while, and you've been very patient with me. So I really appreciate you. And yeah, I'm really happy to be here. I think, yeah, speaking of catalytic moments, that was definitely a big one for me. We all have a lot, and there, when we look back at our life and what brings us to the kind of place we're in today, there are a few major ones, and certainly that was one of the major ones. I started getting symptoms with regards to my epilepsy at around 13, and then I got diagnosed at about 15. I think the reason it was such a shock for not just me, but also for my family is because I grew up with an older sister also who struggles with epilepsy. And she has epilepsy, but she has what's known as intractable epilepsy, which means that it's drug resistant. And so we have very extremely varying degrees of the condition. My sister lives in full-time care, and she can have up to 70, 100 seizures a day, and is hospitalized numerous times a year, and isn't able to lead a normal life as a result. And in my case, it has been a struggle, but I would say in comparison to my sister, it really is nothing. And I have been able to get on with my life, and I'm now off anticonvulsant medicines. My sister takes a lot of different anticonvulsant medicines. So I think it was strange to be diagnosed with this condition so late in life, having been the cognitively healthy sibling and having seen my sister suffer really severely, and spent much of my childhood in and out of intensive care with my sister. We were told she wouldn't live past 18, and she's now 41. So that is a miracle. And I think it was just a real blow. And I really look back at it, and my parents were in shock, and I was in shock. Here was this condition that really had been almost like this dark cloud over my family's shoulders. And I had been the light that came after my sister, who unfortunately was very sick. And then to be diagnosed with the same condition it felt pretty hard, a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah, looking back on my healing journey as well, it's like when you're diagnosed with something that is invisible or you feel healthy to a certain extent, it can be such a shock. I'm curious, what was your healing journey into herbalism and your big advocate of cannabinoids and that holistic healing journey? Take us through what that process was and how that really helped your diagnosis.
Yeah, it's a great point, and you will understand this better than anyone, that living with an invisible illness is really challenging to, I think, to come to accept it yourself, because other people don't see it. And you feel it, and sometimes you're feeling something that is really shaping your life and your everyday, yet other people see you as they did before and in that same light. And so I think and especially as a teenager, for me, that was challenging, being just that deep desire to fit in, which I think teenagers have. And then having this chronic condition that was really triggered by all of the things that teenagers do and want to do. Staying up all night, lack of sleep. My seizures are triggered by stress, lack of sleep, alcohol, skipping meals, anything like that. So that was particularly challenging. And mentioned before, I was put on a cocktail of anticonvulsant medicines, really challenged my mental health and really changed my personality. And I think what was tough was that I was on them for so long that it then became are these symptoms, or is this symptomatic of taking the drugs that I'm on, or is this just me? And I think that is also a struggle for anyone that takes medication, is really starting to get to know the you on medication and wondering what you left behind or who you were before and how you changed. And I grew up in a family that valued like holistic healing and alternative medicine. I started having acupuncture at the age of 13 to help with initially stress, but then to help with my epilepsy. My mum had briefly studied homeopathy and was also an animal healer and practiced mediumship as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I didn't necessarily come from like the most conventional upbringing in regards to how we viewed health and healing. And I think a lot of that was really born out of my sister's journey. However, here I was taking these very strong pharmaceutical drugs that I was told that I would have to take indefinitely, and that I really put myself at risk if I didn't take or if I missed a day. And I think for anyone that suffers from seizures, epilepsy, or a number of other health conditions, you know that fear of skipping your medication, or fear of, you potentially might forget taking it. And I spent many years just battling with like insomnia and anxiety, struggles with memory, challenges with concentration. I was very irritable. I was very angry. And I always wanted to experience life off medication. And I think I had this natural pull towards plant medicine because of the environment in which I grew up with. My mum also, just to give a bit of background, is a florist and garden designer. So it's, I think within the blood. But I think also just having to, like, feeling that I was really like shackled by the pharmaceuticals I was on, made this deep desire to have a cleaner system and to work with natural medicine and natural products. I think it heightened that for me. And all that to say, when I was about 27, I was introduced to cannabinoids from the cannabis plant, which had a profound impact on my health and on my seizures. And I was fortunate enough to be able to wean off all of my anticonvulsant medicines. And I think it's always important to caveat that by saying I was and have been incredibly lucky. And cannabinoids are still a medicine, and they should be considered like other, medicines and drugs, in that they work well for some and they don't work for others. And just because you have a certain type of epilepsy, which in my case is JME, juvenile myoclonic epilepsy, I've met other people with epilepsy with the same condition that have used cannabinoids and haven't been as lucky. Some have also weaned off their medication. Some are using, CBD in conjunction with their anticonvulsants. But I like to be responsible and say that, because it's always important to consult your doctor and know that this is just not a one size fits all. But I started using cannabinoids and quite instantly noticed just such a shift in the way that I was feeling cognitively. I often use Humpty Dumpty as an analogy. Like, it felt like I had been put back together again. I was Humpty Dumpty into all these tiny pieces, and suddenly I'd been put back together. It was like a sense of wholeness. It's hard to describe what having epilepsy feels, but it was just like someone had plugged me into the power source. And I knew my body, I knew how I felt for many years, and I knew quite quickly that this was a more efficacious medicine for me than what I had been previously taking. And as you can imagine, it's a pretty big moment. I started taking it for 6 months alongside my anticonvulsants, and then I decided to, as responsibly as I could, very slowly wean off all of my medication. And I am still seizure-free, and it's been almost 10 years now.
Wow. It's such a powerful story, because I feel conventional medicine, Western medicine, can be such a blessing, but it can also cause so much, from my story, just going through cancer treatment, a lot of fear and a lot of, I was so scared to leave the hospital when I was done with treatment. And I would feel like I was just like this, I felt so caged to these conventional forms of medicine. But then which I feel like you were too, or it seems like you were too, this rebellious patient who was like, no, I'm listening to my body. Like, I have this, and it seems like from your upbringing as well, and just being around nature and holistic healing, that you were able to tune into your intuition and really be an advocate for your own health and healing. What did that look like moving into your diagnosis with endometriosis as well?
I think I always share that story about struggling with epilepsy for many years and now being able to use an alternative medicine to manage my seizures. I think for me, that laid such a powerful foundation for, to your point, trusting in my own intuition and listening to my body. And it is not to demonize allopathic medicine because, again, as you said, there's always a time and a place, and we would be absolutely lost without it. Mm-hmm. However, when there is a safer and a more natural alternative that comes with less side effects, and of course, that's always going to be more preferable. And endometriosis was something that I remember experiencing pain almost for as long as I've menstruated. Perhaps it started around 17, so maybe I had a few years of slightly more manageable pain. But then I think back from around the age of 17, and I started experiencing incredibly painful periods. I would pass out from the pain. I would vomit. I would have these attacks where I would be lying on the pavement. I can remember so many situations. I remember being in the back of the car, my mum driving and being like shouting in the back. I was on the back seat and I was like, I'm dying, like in so much pain. And her panicking. I remember being like in Barcelona when I was like a teen, lying on the pavement floor. Like it was terrifying. It was so terrifying. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I repeatedly kept going to my general practitioner and my OBGYN and trying to articulate the level of pain that I was experiencing. And I think this is another interesting point to loop back on, which is trusting one's intuition. As women, we are incredibly intuitive. And I think that trust in ourselves has been taken away from us. And I think it's really important, and we're certainly reclaiming it now. But I think due to medical misogyny and other patriarchal things that have been projected on us, we have lost a lot of that. And I think my situation is a prime example of that, where I kept repeatedly going to my doctor and saying, this pain that I'm experiencing cannot be normal. I shouldn't be suffering like this. And I was just told time and time again, really the sort of sentiment was that periods are painful and that if you don't take birth control, then you will continue to suffer. And I didn't want to take birth control because I was already taking drugs to manage my seizures. And again, I guess it was that side of myself that just wanted to have somewhat of a cleaner system and not overload my system unnecessarily. In hindsight, I don't know that I made the right decision because I was taking so many painkillers every month to treat this pain. However, when I started using cannabinoids to treat my epilepsy, by this point, I'd weaned off my anticonvulsant medicines. And I would say about a year or so in, I really noticed that my endometriosis pain was shifting and I wasn't experiencing periods that were as painful. If they were at a 10, they dropped down to maybe at about a 6. And at first I thought, okay, perhaps my hormonal imbalance is leveling itself out with age. And at the time I was actually making and working on a documentary about my journey and my sister's journey with epilepsy and cannabis. And so we were doing a lot of research at this time. And I stumbled upon a study that was coming out of Israel specifically on endometriosis and cannabidiol, CBD. And it was this sort of light bulb moment when I suddenly thought, I wonder if there's a correlation here between my improved periods. And at that point, I was also getting to try a lot of different products. I think because I'd been so vocal about my journey with epilepsy and cannabis, I really leaned into advocacy on the sort of patient access side. I was doing a lot of public speaking. I was sharing my journey and I was getting to try and test a lot of products. Again, if I was to go back in time, I probably would have been a lot more cautious with what I was testing and trying, knowing now, what I know. However, I started to, I think, make the connection. And at that point began testing different products and using cannabinoid products in different ratios at different times in my cycle. And really I was just sort of being a guinea pig myself. And I started using cannabinoid suppositories. And when I started using cannabinoids intravaginally, my endometriosis improved even more. And that really, I would honestly say, was the start of wanting to birth my own company, but develop products that I really believe utilizing some of these incredible botanically derived ingredients in nature to help support women and people who are assigned female at birth with managing their hormonal health and their menstrual cycles. This has been a long journey with many different chapters. And I think you know this better than anyone. Oftentimes, like, our darkest days and our struggles end up somehow becoming the light within our life. Like, we somehow can often shift and transform this darkness into something really magical and really light. And I feel very grateful that that in many respects has been my journey.
Yeah, your resiliency is truly like awe-inspiring. And I feel like, yeah, if I didn't go through what I went through, I don't think I ever would have, I wouldn't have been able to birth the business that I have today or be able to share stories. And you touched on Looni, and I would love for you to share more about what Looni is and your mission behind Looni, because it really, it stands apart from the rest in a really powerful way. Like you, I've worked in the editorial industry and I've tested many products, and I'm very conscious of what I put on and in my body. And I think Looni is something incredibly powerful. So share what Looni is and what your mission is behind it as well.
Looni is a hormonal health and wellness company. Our mission is to elevate the menstrual cycle and demystify hormonal health. I've shared the backstory as somebody that struggled with endometriosis for many years, and not just painful periods in the sense of menstrual cramps, but also debilitatingly low moods. I've never been officially diagnosed with PMDD, but I am almost positive that I do have it. And that, for anyone that doesn't know, that's premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which whereby you experience incredibly low moods in the luteal phase in the lead up to your menses. And that has always been the case for me. And I think one of the issues is that we've just normalized all of these different issues that arise from a hormonal imbalance. So this journey has inspired me to develop products to help support people with their cycles. And we currently have one product in market, which is our Balance Beam, which you alluded to before. And this product is our formulation consists of adaptogens, vitamins, minerals, and nootropics in their most bioavailable form. We also conducted a third-party study to really try to prove efficacy of the product. What we were finding is that a lot of products sort of within the wellness space are just, you're either kind of sitting in the wellness box or you're sitting in the pharmaceutical realm. And it felt Eastern and Western approaches just weren't really being blended enough when it came to formulation and the approach that was behind a lot of these products. We started by bringing together an incredible board of physicians to be able to cover all grounds. And by that, we have an OBGYN on our team that specializes in pelvic pain. We also have an OB who's board certified in integrative medicine. We have a physician who specializes in reproductive health. We have another in hormonal health. And then we have a herbalist on our team as well, and a female urologist. There aren't many female urologists in the US, so I always feel very special that we have one of the few. And again, I come back to what it means to take a holistic approach. And for us, that was looking and drawing from Ayurvedic philosophies, traditional Chinese medicine, and really trying to come up with a formulation that was efficacious. And tangible products, we have one. We're also launching another one in October, which is called the Rub, and that will be an all-purpose topical to help support the aches and pains that one experiences during their cycle. But for us, when we talk about Looni, and I think about Looni, our goal long term is to really be a hub and create a hormonal health and wellness platform. So that for me has always been so much more than just tangible products. We want to encourage people to establish a toolbox because we all experienced our cycles differently. And yes, there are a lot of products and there are a lot of different botanically derived ingredients that can help support your cycle. But there are a lot of other things that we can and should be doing when we're experiencing imbalances. Community is certainly one of those pillars. we have an incredible online community that for any of your listeners that might benefit from joining, it's free, and it's really just a space where we support those with chronic conditions like endometriosis, like PCOS, PMDD, fibroids, but also just supporting on different phases of the hormonal life cycle. So whether that's abortion, infertility, pregnancy loss, it's pretty hard to be a woman and travel through all of these different phases without any challenges along the way. And I think for a long time we have been suffering in silence. And I think community is such an important part of healing and supporting oneself. A lot of us try to get therapy when we can. Therapy can be expensive. Some people can't afford it. And I just cannot stress enough how important community is. And I really believe community should be prescribed. It's another solution to managing your hormonal health. And I say that as somebody that had not just a really challenging time with my epilepsy, with endometriosis, but also went on to really struggle with fertility and pregnancy loss. And that's when I started this community. I started the community without thinking about Looni. It was purely personal.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Your story there is really powerful. Dive deeper into your journey with pregnancy loss, because your resiliency and just your hope and your healing is really inspiring.
It's so interesting. And again, I come back to that point that we're discussing about turning what can feel like your darkest days into something light. And I don't want to say that sense that I don't still struggle with my health, because I do. And I now am very fortunate enough to have a small child, and he is 15 months. And I longed for this for so long, but for someone with epilepsy, it's constantly challenging, because getting enough sleep is just not something that is always possible. And my condition is triggered by sleep. I still live with this condition every day, in the same sense that I still have endometriosis. I haven't cured these conditions. I have just got a better hold on managing them. But I was longing for a child for a long time. I went through quite a long phase of also having to get my partner on board, which I know can be quite common. And I knew he'd get there, but it took a while. And I think that was really challenging as someone with endometriosis, because I kept thinking, or knowing time was of the essence, and being worried that I would have a challenging journey, which I did. And the first time I got pregnant, I had an ectopic pregnancy, which, for your listeners that don't know what an ectopic pregnancy is, it's where the fetus begins to develop in the fallopian tube, and doesn't travel down to the womb or to the uterus. And therefore it's not a viable pregnancy. And, it can rupture, which can be fatal. So it's, incredibly dangerous. I think it's one of the leading causes of death in pregnancy. And there's very little awareness about it. It can be really hard to spot unless you're having a scan, which a lot of people don't have early scans. And in my case, I was experiencing some spotting. I went to urgent care in the UK, and they actually sent me away. Because I said to them, "Do you think I'm having an ectopic?" And I remember them saying, "If you were experiencing an ectopic pregnancy, you would be incredibly sick right now." And I ended up going for a scan the following day. And that was within that first 5 minutes of the scan. She said, because I just remember I remember seeing the baby in the heartbeat and being so confused, because I was seeing on the screen, and she just said, "This is sitting in your fallopian tube and this could rupture at any moment." And I was having emergency surgery. 35 minutes later, I was rushed to hospital. The whole thing was incredibly traumatic, and it was just so hard for my body and mind, which I think is something people often talk about in regards to pregnancy loss, to catch up with each other. But I lost a fallopian tube, which was also terrifying, because anything that was going to decrease my chances of becoming a mother. However, you can get pregnant with one tube, which I then did. I lost another baby just through a miscarriage. And it was a really rough journey, to speak candidly on it. It was some of the darkest moments of my life. I really felt this feeling of, I don't want to be here unless I can be a mother. And I think to many people that probably will sound quite extreme or quite intense, but that's how deep my personal longing was. Really just felt just this deep yearning to become a mother. And that journey was just so scary. It's so strange to feel like you don't have any control over it, because most things in life we do have some control. And this particular journey is something that I think women really struggle with, because it's just a loss of control, total loss of control.
It really teaches you to surrender to what is, and not from a place of bypassing, but you really have to lean in and feel your way through it. And I'm curious, you touch on that you have this toolbox of all these modalities and everything. I'm curious, tangibly or maybe energetically, what really helped you push through those dark days and really hold on to the hope throughout healing?
I think community, and I loop back to that point because that's where we branched off from, but that taught me the power of community. I had set up a community for women and mothers of children with epilepsy many years ago. And I really have a love for community building, clearly. I had seen and experienced it there. So I knew it worked. And what I found was during those really dark days, I became very laser focused, almost quite obsessed with finding stories of people who were experiencing losses in the same way I had. I needed to find somebody else that had an ectopic pregnancy, followed by another pregnancy loss, a miscarriage, and then gone on to have a healthy pregnancy. Because without that information, I was losing hope. And so I found myself searching 3 a.m. lying in bed and going on all these sort of forums. And I started to just gravitate towards other women that were struggling with fertility as well, whether they were struggling with IVF or pregnancy loss. And it really, for me, it felt like it was all I wanted to talk about, because it was just, that was what was running through my head every day. And there was only so much that I think my husband could support me on, friends that weren't going through it. That was only so much perhaps they could say. And I also felt like I didn't want to share it with a lot of people. And meanwhile, you're just being bombarded with pregnancy content, everywhere you look. And it's the algorithm knows, right, that you want to be pregnant. So you're getting targeted left and center with this pregnancy thing and that pregnancy thing. And it was I would walk out in the street and all I could see was pregnant women. I remember working from my kitchen table. It was the same thing, just pregnant women going past. But the community really carried me through. And I continue to use community as a tool to really support me through. I'm now a mom. I'm on an incredible mums group. Obviously, Looni community still exists, and I use it really the space to help with cycle management. There's a lot of information that's shared around physicians and a lot of other solutions. So I cannot stress enough how important I think community is. So for anyone that's listening, please come and join our community. In terms of other tools in the toolbox, cycle awareness, incredible tool. And by that, really starting to pay attention to your cycles. We all experience different cycles. Some of us ovulate, some of us don't. Some of us ovulate day 14, some of us don't. We have different lengths of cycles. But really starting to tune in and become intimate with your natural rhythm can be done through taking your basal body temperature. You might not be trying for a baby, but you might want to start doing that. Recognizing when your body's ovulating, looking at your cervical mucus, not being afraid to explore. I think we've been far removed from our own bodies in many respects. Getting more intimate with your menstrual blood. Your menstrual blood can tell you a lot. Starting to look at what color your blood is, at which phase, and how you feel. I think that's such an important one. And the next one I will say is cycle syncing. And so that is really catering your nutrition to the phase of your cycle to optimize your hormonal health. Similarly with movement as well. And I come back to the point about body listening with movement, because I used to be one of those crazy people who would try and run 5 miles 3 days before my menses. And I just wouldn't be able to comprehend why I was struggling to run 5 miles. Yet I'd remembered but I had this amazing run the other day and I had so much energy. And I would berate myself that I didn't have the energy. And then I started to understand that going on a 5-mile run 3 days before your period starts is not the best time to do that cardio, because your body is already in stress state and you're therefore just boosting your cortisol and it's just throwing your system off. And I think, of course, you can find all of this information online now. There's so many incredible places and platforms that offer it. We have a lot of it on our social as well. But what I think should underscore all of these points that I'm making is, had I have been listening to my body, I would have felt that my body was telling me not to run 5 miles. My body felt like a stretch and something restorative. And so again, I encourage people, become intimate with your cycles, with your energy flow. Listen to your creativity, listen to your mood, listen to how you need to sleep, how you need to eat. The amount of times you hear people criticizing themselves because, oh, my period's due, I've eaten everything in the house. Yeah, your metabolism is speeding up. You need more calories at that point. Listen to your body. It's okay.
Yeah, 100%. We need to find grace and be gentle throughout, which can be hard as a high achiever, and which you definitely are as a multidimensional high achiever. And there's so many things that I want to touch on, but I do want to ask how being a mom, talking about like grace and softness, has really impacted like how you live, how you lead, and the work that you put out into the world.
I love this question. I think so many ways. I'm like continually being challenged by the experience, and it's no day is the same, and it's often moment by moment. But I think it has taught me to surrender a bit. I think I have a lot more surrendering to do. My time is not the same anymore because you have something that you're prioritizing above anything else. And for me, I always prioritize my work. My work always came before a lot of other decisions that I made. And it's just, yeah, it's like humbling and incredible that like you could have a jam-packed day, back-to-back meetings, and then here's this little person that's not feeling well and needs you, and just, of course, wanting to drop everything just to take care of that little person. But at the same time, in a way, I wouldn't say there's resistance for me because it's just so clear what I need to do in that moment. But it's almost like you have to go through a stage of grieving the old you. And that feels sometimes complicated because it's, as a high achiever, to your point, it's just, I've always been one of these people who wanted like jam pack my day, cramp everything in. And I think I've just got a little bit more ease and fluidity in the energy in which I approach life. And I think as somebody also that does struggle with epilepsy, and I have to prioritize my health. And that has been the case for a long time. But now there are some nights where, I mentioned this to you at the start of the call, I was saying that I was worried I was going to be very inarticulate because I only had 4 or 5 hours sleep last night. And you just had to go with it, right? You can't do anything else. But there are so many ways. My love and appreciation for women is like it's just like no other. Like it just makes, I'm so in awe of what our bodies are capable of doing. And I think also just all the women who came before, and you suddenly feel this deep appreciation for your own mother, and this kind of like incredible sort of understanding that your parents did their best and they were just kids that look like grown-ups on the outside trying to figure it out. And I always think that's really has been interesting too, because suddenly you're like the grown-up and you might not really feel like a grown-up a lot of the time, and that's pretty wild too.
And they're not supposed to understand. I heard this quote recently, I think it was from Jenna Zoe, that your parents aren't meant to understand exactly what you're doing and how you're doing it. You're meant to outgrow them in a really beautiful way. And that really changed my perspective and my relationship, honestly, with my mom, and being like, she did her best and she's doing her best and she's not meant to understand exactly entrepreneurship and pushing along. Yeah. It really gives a lot of softness and re-sacreds that relationship to not only your mom, but again, like all women. It's like birth it, like we literally were able to birth life. And that is like genuinely the most sacred thing of all.
It is just, it's hard to even intellectualize like what this experience is, because it's so, like, giving birth is just so incredibly like spiritually expansive. Like it's just out of body. And I think all the learnings that come with it. And I love that point you made about just your own experience with having just a little more softness around your relationship with your mom. And I think it's sometimes hard because certainly our generation, we do a lot of work, and a lot of time the deep work starts with family. And so we go in to the weeds and we figure out where our stuff comes from and what caused this and what caused that, and essentially how our parents messed us up. And it can be easy sometimes just to be resentful and blame. And because when you've done a lot of work, you know where certain things come from. But I think if you can pass through that and get to that point where you still get triggered and you still, I think as a mum, there's still things that I'm like, I'm going to do things differently to the way that I experienced them or the way I was parented. But I think, yeah, just having that appreciation for the fact that they were just doing their very best. And now I'm trying to do my very best.
Absolutely. And then the next generation will look back and probably say the same things. But I want to touch on something that you said is just this over intellectualization of healing, which I feel like is what we're experiencing right now. And I feel like a big part of Looni and the work you put out into the world is like dropping into our bodies and really honoring the wisdom that we have within, honoring our bio individuality and listening to our bodies, like resacreding that we have so many cycles within us and around us. And I think a big part of your work is, and Looni is getting to like the root cause and help people guide to that. And every single one of us is different. So thank you for that. And on that note, are there any resources that you would recommend that have just been really supportive along your journey, whether it's personal, professional, miscarriage, endometriosis, anything that stands out? Loaded question.
So many. I'm just trying to think the topics so for anyone looking to learn more about cannabinoids and how they might impact or support different conditions, I love Project CBD. I think it's projectcbd.org. That is an incredible platform, educational platform that focuses on cannabinoids and how they can support people who are struggling with many different conditions. Obviously, I mentioned Looni's Community. I loved Woman Code by Alicia Vitti. I think I'm pronouncing her name correctly.
Elisa Vitti, yeah. She's incredible.
Incredible. I think she was a real pioneer of cycle syncing, and she speaks to how to implement that protein in a very comprehensible, digestible way. So I really would recommend her book. Let me think what else. Please come over to Looni's blog. We talk a lot about topics that I've mentioned today, from pregnancy loss to period sex, you name it. There's a lot of information there, as well as our social. And yeah, I can keep going. Maybe we'll follow up in the show notes and I'll send some more. I did also just want to recommend Dr. Aviva Romm. She is incredible. Actually, was fortunate enough to speak on her podcast recently, but she has 2 incredible books that have just been such a huge part, an influential part of my journey with herbal medicine. She has one book which is called Hormonal Intelligence, and the other one that's called Botanical Medicine for Women's Health. Cannot recommend those books enough. Those have been Bibles for me.
Yeah, we'll definitely have those in the show notes. But to wrap, I have so many more questions, but I feel like we're going to have you back to drill down deeper into some of these stories, because I feel like, similar to you, I think connecting with people and hearing those stories are the most healing of all. Like the tips, the tools, the modalities all help, but it's really like getting the expansion and hearing other people going through something similar is the most healing thing. So thank you for being here. And to wrap, okay, so we do Face Off, which is a series of quick fire questions meant to be answered in 2 to 3 sentences. You ready?
Oh gosh.
What are you currently doing right now to learn and grow?
Currently, I am being a mother. Continuing to build Looni, listen to the community. I think there's no place I learn more than actually listening to people that are experiencing a lot of the conditions and challenges that we've spoken about today.
Beautiful. How are you slowing down and resacreding life right now?
How am I
slowing down and resacreding life right now?
How am I slowing down? And I think I am slowing down by trying to be more fluid with my time, energy, and approach to the day, listening to my body more as I get older, and remembering to breathe when I can't make the time for meditation, or perhaps I'm not able to practice yoga. Just trying to listen to the breath and check in. That it takes a few seconds, and it can be done when you're washing your hands, washing the dishes. Just a small check-in. Listening to your breath can help really ground you, bring you back into the body and slow you down.
Love that. I'm a big proponent of just meditation is interwoven within each and everything that we do. And I'm sure being a mom really helps you or motivates you to become more discerning with your time. Not even motivates you, forces you to become more discerning with your time and finding that and really embodying that. What's a recent challenge you faced that you were scared of, but you overcame?
I overcame a recent challenge. Oh gosh, I'm not very good at answering these very quickly, am I? I traveled solo with my little boy recently. I guess that's not a very big challenge, but it was one I was
I'm
nervous
sure that's a
about.
huge one. I'm sure that's a
And
huge
I
one.
overcame that. Again, I might have a more interesting answer. I'm not very good at five.
No, I can only imagine the travel with a little one. You just have to embrace like comedy and levity at that point. You're just like, this is my
Totally.
life
And
and
no
just lean
sleep.
into it. Yeah.
I think, like, for anyone that struggles with epilepsy, they'll understand, like, the most terrifying thing is lack of sleep. I have had to do a lot of work around just like anxieties that crop up with travel, because sometimes you're not able to get that sleep. So I think having a child to care for in that moment as well is especially terrifying. And yeah, overcoming that and doing it all on no sleep, that for me was something small I overcame.
100%. What is one thing you wish people knew about you?
One thing I wish people knew about me. I think that, I guess what is coming up for me first is that I'm quite afraid. I think I have a very strong and bold exterior, and that masks a lot of who I am on the inside. I'm a classic Leo lion on the outside, but on the inside, I have a lot of fear, and I have to work very hard on that. I think some people will know that about me, so I don't know if that's if that's something that nobody knows. But yeah, I think it's always nice to see both sides of people, right?
100%. I think you do an incredible job about being genuinely vulnerable and not just like sharing your story, because I think sometimes that can actually be easy for someone who has been through trauma. Like for me, I'm like, oh yeah, I can share my story. Like I have it recited, but like really speaking from the heart is incredibly scary. And I'm the same way as a Cancer sun, hard shell, but like softy and so emotional on the inside. We're definitely going to have you back too to continue this conversation. But last but not least, with all of the things that you do, what can we expect from you growing forward?
So keep an eye out for our second product launch, which will be in October, which I alluded to before, which is our menstrual balm called the Rub. We're really excited to launch that. It's been gone through many iterations, and it's been in the making for a long time. I think continuing to build out Looni, we are hopefully going to be launching other products that aren't tangible products, that really centralize all of our education. And I think we've spoken about a lot of those other tools in the toolbox today. So I think keep an eye out there. Personally, and my documentary, we didn't really go into that much today, but that will be streaming on a platform soon. It's called Sisters Interrupted. And again, this is a documentary which focuses on my journey, my family's fight to gain access for my sister to medical cannabis.
Which is incredible and so powerful. And we'll definitely link all of these in the show notes below. And where can we find you personally as well?
You can find me at Chelsea Leyland on Instagram. You can find Looni, my.looni, and we are looni.co.
That's great. I think you're really a pioneer in so many different ways and are making waves. So I'm excited to see this next project or product, because I feel like I deeply needed it actually when I was going through cancer treatment. I was searching for something similar to this that had like a cooling effect. And so I'm excited to give it a try.
I can't wait for you to try it. And also, we really have taken our time with regards to the scent. have had a lot of issues just as somebody with autoimmune, getting triggered by scent and fragrances, and a lot of natural products, even though they are using beautiful essential oils, a lot of the time they are quite potent. And for some people with certain conditions, that can be very triggering and also can be very disruptive of our endocrine function. And so I think expect that to be a topic that we're hopefully going to be diving into a lot more soon. And watch this space, and yeah, keep an eye out for our product launch.
Oh, that's incredible. Yeah, just because it's natural doesn't mean that it's going to work well with your body. There's like a whole spectrum.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it can be convoluted. So thank you for breaking through the noise and for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you being so patient with me and just, yeah, inviting me on and being such an incredible
Of course.
interviewer today. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Talk soon.
Thank you so much.